Tonight, we travel by train, moving through the evening into darkness, carried eastward across a landscape we cannot see but can sense in the rhythm of wheels on rails and the gentle rocking of our carriage. This is a journey from another time, from the Belle Époque, when trains were palaces on wheels and travel itself was something to be savored rather than simply endured. We're not rushing toward anything, not anxious about arrival, simply present to this moment of motion and rest, to the particular peace that comes from being suspended between departure and destination. The train left the station an hour ago, pulling away from the platform with that smooth gathering of momentum that seems almost effortless, as though the great locomotive were simply leaning forward into the journey ahead. We watched the city lights fade behind us, replaced gradually by the softer darkness of countryside, and now we're ready to settle into the evening, to prepare our small compartment for the night, to create a space where we can rest while miles and hours. There's something deeply comforting about of travel, about being carried while we sleep, about trusting in the competence of people we'll never meet to deliver us safely need to be. The train knows has traveled it countless times before, and we can surrender to its knowledge, let go of the need to navigate or plan or worry. All we need to do is rest, and the train will take care of the rest. Our compartment is small, but perfectly appointed, every surface designed with care, every fitting chosen for both beauty and function. The walls are paneled in mahogany that glows warmly in the lamplight, and there's brass everywhere, on the lamp brackets and door handles, on the safety rail above the berth, and the hooks where we might hang a coat. Everything has been polished until it shines, maintained with the kind of attention to detail that speaks of pride in craft and respect for passengers. We have the whole evening ahead of us, hours of gentle motion and darkness, and the particular quality of peace that belongs only to night train. There's no hurry, no schedule we need to keep beyond the train's own rhythms. We can take our time preparing for sleep, can savor each small task, lowering the berth, arranging the bedding, settling ourselves into comfort. And when we're ready, when everything is exactly as it should be, we can let ourselves drift into rest, trusting that the train will carry us safely through the night. So let us begin this evening ritual together, moving slowly through each familiar gesture, attending to the details that transform a simple railway compartment into a haven for rest. Let us lower the berth and smooth the sheets, draw the bamboo blind against the darkness outside, and find our way into the deep, peaceful sleep that comes only when we're moving through the night, carried eastward by this patient. The journey has already begun, and the night is long and kind, and we have all the time we... Tonight, we prepare the sleeping compartment on the eastbound express, a ritual of small gestures that transforms a narrow space into a haven suspended between cities. The train has left the station an hour ago, and now the countryside rolls past in deepening blue twilight, the rhythm of wheels on rails already settling into that particular music of forward motion and rest combined. We step into the compartment and close the door behind us with a soft click, the polished brass handle cool beneath our palm. The space is compact but perfectly appointed, every surface designed to serve and comfort in equal measure. Mahogany panels line the walls, their grain catching the warm light from the small brass lamp mounted beside the window. The wood has been oiled until it glows with a deep amber sheen, and when we run our fingertips along the edge of the folding table, the surface feels like silk, worn smooth by countless journeys before this one. The first task is always the berth. During the day it folds up against the wall, hidden carved panel that matches the rest of the compartment's woodwork. But now, in the evening, it must be lowered and made ready. We reach for the small bronze latch, no larger than a pocket watch, and press it gently. The mechanism releases with a whisper of oiled hinges, and the sleeping platform descends on its brass chains with barely a sound, coming to rest at exactly the right height. The Belle Époque trains were furnished by craftsmen from workshops in Paris and Brussels, where apprentices learned to fit joints so precisely that no glue was needed, only the natural expansion of seasoned wood in its. Each compartment took nearly a month to complete. The panels matched for color and the brass fixtures cast from molds that were broken after a single use, so that no two lamp brackets or door handles were exactly alike. We lift the folded mattress from its storage beneath the bench seat, feeling its weight, horsehair and cotton batting wrapped in ticking striped in pale blue and cream. The fabric has the particular texture of materials made to last, sturdy but not coarse, with a slight give that promises comfort. Unfolding it onto the berth platform takes only a moment, and we smooth it down with both hands, pressing out any creases from its time and storage. The horsehair makes a faint rustling sound as it settles, then goes quiet. The sheets come next, stored in a small cupboard above the washstand. They're cool to the touch, folded with hospital corners already creased into the fabric from the laundry. We shake out the bottom sheet, and it billows in the compartment's close air, filling the space with the scent of lavender and starch. The laundries that served the railway companies dried their linens on lines stretched across fields of wild herbs, and the wind carried the fragrance into the weave, a practice as old as the trade routes themselves. Tucking the corners requires a certain rhythm, pull and fold, pull and tuck, moving around the narrow berth with practiced efficiency. The cotton is heavy and fine, woven tight enough to feel almost slippery, and as we work it into place, it catches the lamplight in small ripples. The top sheet follows, then the blanket, wool in a soft dove gray, bound at the edges with satin ribbon the color of twilight. We fold it down at an angle, leaving a triangle of white sheet exposed, the way travelers have been welcome to sleep for generations. The pillow is plump with down, its linen case embroidered in one corner with the railway company's monogram, a graceful interweaving of letters in thread that matches the gray of the blanket. We place it at the head of the berth and give it a small pat, watching it settle into its final shape. The down inside was collected from elder ducks nesting on northern islands, where the birds line their nests with their own breast feathers to keep their eggs warm, and collectors gather only what the ducks can spare, leaving the nests undisturbed. Now the berth is ready, a small perfect bed suspended in motion. We turn our attention to the window. During the day we've kept the blind raised to watch the passing landscape, but evening has arrived, and the outside world has faded to shadows and occasional lights from distant farmhouses. The blind itself is made of split bamboo, each slat no wider than a finger, threaded together with silk cord that has darkened slightly with age. We reach for the tassel that hangs beside the window frame, wrapped in more of that twilight gray ribbon, and pull gently. The blind descends with a soft rattle, each bamboo slat clicking against the next in a cascade of small sounds that seem to belong to the rhythm of the train itself. When it reaches the windowsill, it settles with a final quiet tap, and the compartment becomes suddenly more intimate, more enclosed, a world unto itself. Bamboo blinds like these were first woven by artisans in the eastern provinces, where the reeds grew tall along riverbanks, and families worked together in the shade of their houses, splitting and smoothing each piece by hand before threading them into these practical curtains that breathed in summer and kept the cold at bay in winter. Between the slats, thin lines of lamplight from the corridor outside create a pattern on the opposite wall, parallel stripes that sway gently with the motion of the train. We secure the blind's lower edge with a small brass hook, no larger than a thimble, and it holds the bamboo curtain in place against the window glass. The washstand deserves attention next. It folds down from the wall beneath a mirror, framed in the same mahogany as the wall panels, and we lower it. A small porcelain basin is revealed, white with a delicate band of gold leaf around its rim. We pour water from the carafe that sits in its holder beside the mirror, the stream making a musical sound as it fills the basin halfway. The water is cool and clear, and we dip our hands in it, feeling the day's dust rinse away in preparation. The soap sits in a small dish, oval and smooth, wrapped in paper that crinkles as we unwrap it. It smells of almond and honey, a simple clean scent that belongs to evening rituals. We work it between our hands until it lathers, then rinse again, and dry on the linen towel hangs from a brass ring beside the mirror. The towel is thick and soft, monogrammed like the pillowcase, and it absorbs the water readily. Now comes the portion of the evening. From our traveling bag we remove a small bundle of letters tied with ribbon and carried with us across half the continent. They arrived at the last city, waiting at the hotel desk, and we've saved them for this moment. The train moving through the night, the compartment prepared, the world reduced to this warm-lit space, and the words of people we care for. We settle onto the made berth, back against the pillow, feet drawn up, the blanket's edge within easy reach should the evening grow cool. The letters rest in our lap, and we untie the ribbon slowly, savoring the anticipation. The paper is good quality, heavy enough to hold ink without bleeding, and some of the envelopes bear seals pressed in colored wax, burgundy, forest green, the deep blue of midnight. The first letter is from our sister, her handwriting as familiar as our own face in the mirror. She writes of her garden coming into bloom, of the roses climbing the arbor beside the kitchen door, of morning spent cutting flowers for the table. Her words paint pictures we can see clearly even here, hundreds of miles away, the motion of the train carrying us further from those familiar rooms and gardens, but bringing us these small pieces of home nonetheless. In Belle Époque, France, letter writing was considered an art form, and young people learned particular phrases and formats for different occasions. But the most treasured letters were always those that captured the daily details, the weather, the meals, the small happenings that made up the texture. We read about her neighbor's new kitten, about the way the morning light falls across the dining room floor in summer, about the jam she's made from the apricot that came ripe all at once. The train sways gently as it rounds a curve, and the lamp beside the window flickers once but holds steady. Outside, in the darkness, another train passes going the opposite direction, its lit windows flashing past like a string of amber beads pulled quickly through the night, and then it's gone, and we're alone again, with the steady rhythm of our own journey. The second letter is from a friend, someone we knew years ago and have kept in touch with through correspondence that spans continents and decades. This friend writes of travels in the South, of cities wide and blue under the sun, of markets filled with lemons and olives and bread still warm from wood-fired ovens. The descriptions make us hungry in a pleasant way, though we've already dined in the restaurant car earlier this evening, and we remember the taste of the soup rich with vegetables and herbs, and the small glass of wine that came with the main course. We read slowly, not rushing through the words, but letting each sentence settle and create its own small world in our imagination. There's no hurry tonight. The train will carry us where we need to go, whether we read quickly or slowly, and these letters deserve our full attention, each one a gift of time and thought from someone who cares enough to put pen to paper and share their days with us. The third letter is shorter, a note really, from a cousin who never writes much, but whose few words always carry weight. This one speaks of an upcoming celebration, an invitation extended, plans made for when we return from this journey. We make a mental note to reply when we reach our destination, to accept the invitation and mark the date on the calendar we carry in our luggage. Outside the narrow window, beyond the lowered bamboo blind, the night continues to deepen. Occasionally, a station passes, its platform lit and empty, or a crossing where a single lantern swings in the wind that our passage creates. But these moments are brief interruptions in the larger darkness, and each time we return to the steady rhythm of forward motion, the wheels finding their music on the rails, the car swaying in its particular gentle way that becomes, after a time, not motion at all, but a kind of stillness, suspended within movement. We reach the final letter, this one in an envelope sealed with the midnight blue wax. The handwriting is elegant, the words sparse but meaningful, speaking of patience and seasons, of things that grow slowly and cannot be hurried. We read it twice, then carefully return all the letters to their envelopes, retie the ribbon, and set the bundle on the small shelf beside the berth where we'll see them first thing in the morning. The lamp can be dimmed now, and we reach for its small brass key, turning it until the flame drops to a low glow that fills the compartment with amber shadow. The berth is ready, the night is ready, and we are ready for sleep. Carried forward through the darkness in this small room of mahogany and brass, wheels singing their endless song beneath us, letters read and hearts full, the journey continuing while we rest. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The compartment has settled into its nighttime configuration, and we lie still for a moment, listening to the symphony of small sounds that make up the train's evening music. There's the steady clack-clack of wheels on rails, a rhythm so constant it becomes less a sound and more a heartbeat, something felt in the body rather than heard with the ears. Beneath that primary rhythm runs a quieter melody, the creak of wood flexing slightly as the car sways, the whisper of steam in pipes that carry warmth from the locomotive through the length of the train, the occasional distant clink of glass or metal from other compartments, where fellow travelers are also settling into their own evening ritual. We're not quite ready for sleep, not yet. There's a particular luxury in this twilight time, this hour between activity and rest, and we want to savor it fully. The dim lamp casts its amber glow across the ceiling, and we watch the shadows there, how they shift and dance with the train's motion, creating patterns that are never quite the same twice. Outside, beyond the lowered blind, the French countryside continues to roll past in darkness, but we can sense its presence, the openness when we cross fields, the brief enclosure when we pass through cuttings where stone walls rise on either side, the sudden hollow echo when we enter a tunnel and the world contracts to nothing but sound and forward motion. The engineers who designed these railway routes in the 1890s were artists as much as technicians, choosing paths would showcase the beauty of the landscape while maintaining the smooth gradients necessary for comfortable travel. They walked the proposed routes on, noting where a cutting through a hillside would frame a view of distant mountains, where a curve would reveal a river valley in the most dramatic light. Some spent years surveying a single stretch of, ensuring that passengers would experience the journey as a series of carefully composed scenes. We reach for the small decanter that sits in its secure holder on the wall, a cut glass vessel no larger than our two hands together, filled with water that catches the lamplight and fractures into tiny rainbows. The railway company refreshes these decanters at each major station, filling them with water from local wells known for their purity and pleasant taste. We pour a small measure into the matching glass that rests beside it, hearing the liquid sound, that particular music of water, finding its level in crystal. The glass is cool against our lips, and the water itself tastes clean and slightly mineral, with a character that speaks of deep aquifers and ancient stone. After drinking, we return the glass to its place and settle back against the pillow, hands folded across our middle in an attitude of perfect rest. The wool blanket that we pulled up earlier has the weight and warmth that comes from natural fibers, and where it touches our arms, we can feel the individual strands of fleece that were combed and spun and woven somewhere in the highlands where sheep have grazed for centuries on mountains that turn purple. The merino sheep that provided wool for the finest railway blankets were descendants of flocks that traveled from Spain to France in the 18th century, carefully bred for their soft fleece and their hardiness in mountain weather. The wool was valued not just for warmth, but for its ability to regulate temperature, keeping the travelers comfortable whether the night turned cold or the compartment grew too warm from the heating pipes. Through the bamboo blind comes the faintest signal of moonlight, thin silver lines that stripe across the blanket in parallel with the brass fittings of the compartment. The moon must have risen while we were reading our letters, climbing above the horizon to take its place in the night sky. And though we cannot see it directly, we can sense its presence in this borrowed light, this gentle illumination that requires nothing of us to see the shapes of our temporary home, even in the lamp's lowest. We think about the letters we read, letting the words surface again in memory. Our sister's garden, roses climbing toward the summer sun. Our friend's southern journey, markets bright with citrus and salt air. Our cousin's brief note, its invitation to celebrate something that hasn't yet happened, but will in time, when seasons turn and we return from wherever this train is carrying us. The letters are physical objects resting on the shelf beside us, but they're also something less tangible. Connections maintained across distance, affection made manifest in ink and paper, proof that we are thought of and cared for, even when far from home. The art of letter writing reached its zenith during the Belle Époque, when postal services connected even the smallest villages to the great cities, and when a letter sent in the morning might be delivered by evening or certainly by next day. People wrote letters as easily as we now send messages, but with more care and deliberation, choosing words that would be read and reread, folded and kept, sometimes treasured for a lifetime in boxes tied with ribbon. A gentle knock comes at the compartment door, so soft it barely registers above the train's ambient sounds. We call out softly that whoever it is may enter, and the door opens to reveal the carriage attendant, an older gentleman in the railway company's uniform of deep blue wool with brass buttons that gleam even in the corridor's subdued lighting. He inclines his head in a small bow and asks, in a voice barely above a whisper, if we require anything for the night. an extra blanket perhaps, or a pot of herbal tea to aid sleep, or the morning newspaper to be delivered with breakfast. We thank him, but decline, saying we have everything we need. He nods again, wishes us a peaceful night in that same quiet voice, closing the door with the practiced care of someone who knows that rest is sacred and must not be disturbed more than absolutely necessary. We hear his footsteps recede down the corridor, soft on the carpet runner, that muffled sound, and then he's gone, and we're alone again with the night and the train and the gentle rocking motion that is slowly, imperceptibly drawing us down toward sleep. The attendants on the Belle Époque trains were trained in hotels and grand houses, learning the art of service that anticipates needs before they're expressed, that appears when wanted and vanishes when not, that understands the difference between attentiveness and intrusion. Many came from families that had worked in service for generations, carrying forward knowledge and standards that were passed from parent to child like precious heirlooms. We reach up to adjust the pillow, fluffing it and shifting it to exactly the right angle. The down inside makes almost no sound, just the faintest whisper of feather against feather, and when we settle back, the pillow cradles our head with perfect support, neither too soft nor too firm. The linen pillowcase is cool against our chin. We turn slightly to press our face more fully into that coolness, breathing in the faint scent of lavender that lingers in all the train's linens. Above us, secured to the mahogany paneling, runs a safety rail of polished brass, installed to prevent a sleeping passenger from rolling out of the berth should the train take a curve too quickly or break unexpectedly. We reach up and rest one hand on it, feeling its solidity, its smooth surface worn to sap by the touch of countless hands. It's comforting somehow, this rail, this thoughtful provision for safety that requires nothing of us, but is there nonetheless a silent guardian. The brass fittings throughout the train, the lamps, the handles, the rails, the hooks and brackets and hinges, were cast in foundries outside Lyon, where metal workers had perfected their craft over centuries of making everything from church bells to clockwork mechanisms. The brass was an alloy of copper and zinc, sometimes with tiny amounts of other metals added to give it particular properties of strength or color, and each piece was individually finished by hand, buffed until it glowed with that characteristic warm sheen. We let our hand fall back to rest on the blanket, and for a while we simply exist in this moment, this particular configuration of time and space and circumstance. We are here now, in this small moving room, suspended between departure and arrival, between activity and rest, between wakefulness and sleep. The train carries us forward at a steady pace, not fast by modern measures perhaps, but fast enough, smooth enough, with a quality of motion that feels almost like floating. Outside, unseen in the darkness, the landscape continues to. We pass through regions where limestone cliffs rise white in the moonlight, where rivers run swift and cold with snowmelt from distant mountains, where forests climb hillsides in dark masses of oak and chestnut and pine. We pass through villages where a single light still burns in a kitchen window, where a dog barks once and falls silent, where the local station sits empty except for mail bags waiting for the next train. We pass over bridges of iron and stone, some so ancient their builders' names are lost to time, others so new their metal still smells of the forge. But we see none of this directly. What we experience instead is the train's response to the landscape, the slight change in the sound of the wheels when we cross a bridge, the brief darkness and echo when we enter a tunnel, the subtle shift in motion when we climb a gentle grade or descend the other side. The train interprets the world for us, translates it into sensations we can feel and sounds we can hear without leaving the comfort of our berth, without opening our eyes. The French railway system of the Belle Époque was considered the finest in Europe, a network of steel and stone that connected every major city and hundreds of smaller towns, making travel accessible to people who had never ventured far from their birthplaces. The trains ran with remarkable punctuality, their schedules synchronized like the movements of a vast machine, and passengers came to depend on this reliability, planning their lives around the certain knowledge that the train would arrive when it promised to arrive, that they would reach their destinations when they intended to reach them. We feel sleep approaching now, not as an interruption, but as a natural continuation of the evening's gradual wind down. Our breathing has slowed without our noticing, falling into rhythm with the train's rocking motion. Our muscles have released tensions we didn't know we were carrying, and our body has become heavy against the mattress, sinking into its horsehair and cotton support as though into a gentle embrace. The lamp still burns, but its light seems dimmer now, or perhaps our eyes have simply adjusted to the darkness behind our eyelids. We could reach for the brass key and turn it all the way, extinguishing the flame entirely, but there's something comforting about leaving it lit at this low level, a small beacon in the night, a warm presence that asks nothing of us. We think drowsily of our destination, still hours away in the darkness ahead. There will be a platform and morning light and the bustle of arrival. There will be porters and taxis and a hotel room waiting, and after that, whatever business or pleasure brought us on this journey in the first place. But all of that belongs to tomorrow, to the future, to a time that doesn't yet exist. Right now, in this moment, there is only the compartment, the berth, the warmth of the blanket, the rhythm of the rails. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. Sleep hovers at the edges of consciousness now, like mist, gathering in a valley at dusk, not yet thick enough to obscure everything, but present enough to soften all the sharp edges of waking thought. We drift in that particular state between worlds, aware of the train's motion and the compartment's warmth, but also aware of dreams beginning to form in the deeper places of the mind, images that have no clear source but feel vivid nonetheless. A garden path, a doorway opening onto sunlight, the sound of water running over stones. The berth cradles us with complete security, the mattress beneath and the blanket above, creating a cocoon of comfort that seems designed for exactly this moment, this particular quality of rest that comes only when traveling, when home is both behind and ahead. But the present moment belongs entirely to the journey itself. We shift slightly, finding an even more comfortable position, and the horsehair mattress adjusts beneath us with a soft whisper, conforming to the new arrangement of limbs and body weight. Through the lowered bamboo blind, the moon continues to send its silver light, and now we notice how it catches on the fittings of the compartment, making them glow softly as though lit from the lamp bracket, the door handle, the safety rail above our head, the small hooks where one might hang a coat or a hat. All of them gather that moonlight and hold it for a moment before releasing it back into the air. It's a silent conversation between the celestial and the earthly, between the vast night sky outside and this intimate space where we rest. The moon that illuminates our journey is the same moon that shone on the craftsmen who built this, on the engineers who laid its tracks, on all the travelers who came before us, and all In the Belle Époque, astronomers were making new discoveries about the lunar surface, mapping its mountains and craters with increasingly powerful telescopes. But for most people, the moon remained what it had always been, a companion in the night, a measure of time, a source of soft light that cost nothing and asked nothing in return. We close our eyes fully now, surrendering to the darkness behind our eyelids, but somehow we can still sense the compartment around us, can still feel its dimensions and its character. The space has become so familiar in these few hours that we could navigate it blind, could reach out and touch the wall panel or the water carafe or the shelf where our letters rest, could find everything by feel and memory alone. This is one of the gifts of travel, the way a temporary home can become, for a time, as known and comfortable as the permanent one we left behind. The train's motion has become inseparable from our own breathing now, each inhalation and exhalation synchronized with the rocking sway of the carriage, so that we cannot tell whether we are moving to match the train's rhythm or whether the train has somehow adjusted itself to match ours. It's a kind of dance, this partnership between passenger and machine, between the human need for rest and the mechanical reality of forward motion. Railway carriages of this era were suspended on springs and leather straps designed to absorb the shocks and jolts of the track, creating what engineers called a floating effect, the sense that the passenger compartment existed slightly apart from the wheels and rails, cushioned and protected from the harshest movements. The principle was borrowed from the suspension of fine coaches, adapted and refined until these railway carriages offered a smoother ride than almost any other form of transport. A sound reaches us from somewhere distant in the train, a door closing perhaps, or a window being latched, or simply the settling of wood and metal as the temperature drops. The sound is not alarming, merely present, a reminder that we are not alone in this long, articulated vehicle, but are one of many travelers, each in their own compartment, each settling into their own version of night, their own dreams and thoughts and preparations for tomorrow. We think about the other passengers without knowing anything specific. Perhaps there is a merchant returning from business in the capital, carrying samples in a leather case and worrying gently about orders and deliveries. Perhaps there is a young couple on their wedding journey, still amazed to find themselves together, still learning the small intimacies of shared space and shared sleep. Perhaps there is an elderly woman visiting grandchildren she has not seen since last year, carrying gifts wrapped in tissue paper and tied with string. Perhaps there is a scholar with a briefcase full of notes and books, thoughts still churning over some problem or theory, even as sleep approaches. We are all connected by this train, by our shared experience of motion and night, and the particular quality of rest that comes from. We will likely never meet, will likely never know each other's names or stories, but for these hours we exist together in a kind of temporary community, a fellowship of distance and destiny. The tradition of night trains in Europe created a unique culture of shared anonymity, where people from vastly different backgrounds traveled side by side, sleeping and waking in synchronized rhythms, sharing corridors and dining cars, but maintaining the respectful distance that allowed each passenger their privacy. It was considered good form to acknowledge fellow travelers with a nod or a quiet greeting, but not to intrude with questions or conversation unless invited. The heating pipes that run through the compartment emit a gentle warmth now, not hot, but pleasantly temperate, taking the edge off the night's coolness, without making the air stuffy or close. We can feel this warmth most directly on our where they rest on top of the blanket, a subtle radiation that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The railway company prided itself on maintaining comfortable temperatures in all seasons, feeding steam from the locomotive through insulated pipes that wound through every carriage, a system that required constant attention from the engine crew but ensured passenger comfort. Somewhere in the train, probably near the front of our carriage, the attendant has his own small compartment where he rests between his rounds, ready to respond if any passenger rings the small bell installed beside each door. We picture him there, perhaps dozing in a narrow bunk, not unlike our own, perhaps reading by lamplight, perhaps simply watching the night pass outside his window. His job requires a particular temperament, patience, discretion, the ability to remain alert while others sleep, to move silently through the corridors, checking doors and adjusting heating valves and ensuring that the hundreds of small details that make a night train function are all in their proper order. The attendants kept logbooks where they recorded every request, every incident, every notable occurrence during their shifts. These logbooks have survived in archives, offering glimpses into the daily life of train travel, requests for extra pillows, reports of mechanical issues, notes about passengers who were particularly pleased or particularly difficult, records of the weather at each station, observations about delays, and our mind begins to wander in the way that minds do. And sleep is thoughts becoming less linear, more associative, jumping from one image or memory to another without clear connection. We think of the garden our sister wrote about, and then we're remembering a garden from childhood, a place we haven't thought of in years, but which suddenly seems vivid and present. The way light fell through grape leaves onto a stone path, the sound of bees working through lavender blooms, the taste of berries picked warm from the vine. Then that memory fades, and we're thinking about, or rather, we're thinking about not thinking about tomorrow, about how we've decided to let tomorrow take care of itself, to remain here in this present moment for as long as before the future arrives with its demands and schedules. The train will get us there when it gets us, and until then, we are suspended, timeless, this space between. The bamboo blind rattles softly as we pass through a stretch where the wind must be stronger, finding gaps around station platforms or between buildings, and the sound is pleasant, rhythmic, adding another layer to the train's ongoing symphony. Each individual slat clicks against its neighbor, a cascade of tiny percussion that rises and falls with the wind's pressure. And we think about the artisan who wove this particular blind, wonder whether they had any sense that their work would travel like this, would hang in a moving window and filter moonlight for strangers years after it left their hands. Craft work in the Belle Époque was often anonymous, the makers signing their pieces not with names, but with marks or symbols that identified their workshop or guild. A particular way of knotting silk thread, a specific pattern in the weaving, a characteristic finishing technique. These were the signatures that allowed those who knew to identify where, and sometimes even who, had made an object, even when no written record existed. We draw the blanket up a little higher, tucking it around our shoulders, and the wool's warmth settles over us like a second skin. Our feet at the other end of the berth are comfortable, neither too warm nor too cool, and we can feel, through the blanket's weight, where our body makes contact with the mattress, the way we're held and supported from beneath while being gently covered from above. It's a perfect balance, this arrangement of bedding, the result of centuries of refinement in the art of making people comfortable enough to sleep away from home. The lamp flame flickers once more, a small wavering in its steady glow, and we open our eyes just enough to see the light dancing on the ceiling, creating shadows that seem to breathe with the train's motion. Then we close them again, heavier now, harder to lift, and we let them stay closed. Let the darkness behind our eyelids become complete and total. Let it fill our awareness until there's nothing but warmth and motion and the distant, steady rhythm of wheels on rails. We're drifting now, truly drifting, consciousness loosening its grip on the present moment, beginning to float free into those other realms where dreams hold sway and logic takes forms that waking minds would find strange, but sleeping minds accept. The train carries us deeper into the night, deeper into sleep, and we go willingly, gratefully, surrendering to rest, with complete trust that we will wake when it's time to wake, that the train will continue its journey while we sleep, that all is well and safe and exactly as it should be. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. Sleep comes in layers, we discover, not all at once, but in gradual veils that descend one after another until consciousness has retreated so far into the depths that even the train's motion is something felt only in dreams. We drift through the early part of the night in that first light layer of sleep, where sounds from the world still register, but are incorporated into the dream narratives our minds are weaving. The clack of wheels becomes footsteps in a remembered hallway. The whistle at a distant crossing becomes birdsong in a garden we once knew. Time loses its ordinary meaning in sleep, especially sleep that happens while traveling. We might doze for 10 minutes or an hour, and when we surface briefly toward waking, there's no way to tell which it was without consulting a clock, and we have no desire to consult a clock, no need to know the exact hour. The night is long enough for rest, and that's all that matters. We're aware dimly of the train still moving beneath us, still carrying us eastward through the darkness, and this awareness is comforting rather than disturbing, a steady presence that anchors us even in. The compartment has grown slightly cooler as the night deepens, the kind of coolness that makes the blanket's warmth even more welcome, and we draw it closer around our shoulders in a movement that's more instinct than conscious decision. The wool holds heat like a living thing, creating a microclimate of comfort beneath its folds, and our body responds by relaxing even further, releasing into the support of the mattress and the pillow. Wool's remarkable insulating properties come from the structure of each individual fiber, which is covered in tiny scales and contains air pockets that trap warmth, while allowing moisture to escape. The sheep that grew this wool lived their lives on hillsides where temperatures could swing from freezing nights to warm days, and their fleece evolved to handle these extremes, a natural technology that no human invention has quite managed to match for comfort and durability. We become aware, in that distant way of half-sleep, that the train has slowed slightly, not stopped, but reduced its speed, probably approaching a station where it will pause briefly to exchange mail and parcels, to allow the handful of passengers who travel at these odd hours to board or disembark. We don't open our eyes, don't rise to look out the window, but we can feel the change in the rhythm, the way the wheel's song shifts to a slower tempo, the way the carriage's rocking motion becomes gentler, less pronounced. The train glides into the station with barely a whisper of brakes, and then we're stopped, suspended in stillness that feels strange after so many hours. Outside, voices murmur in the darkness, the station master greeting the conductor, porters moving luggage, someone laughing quietly at a joke we cannot hear. These sounds are muffled by distance and by the bamboo blind and by our own drowsy state, reaching us from very far from another world, and then a door opens and closes somewhere in our carriage, footsteps, and the attendant probably checking on something or assisting a new passenger to their we hear his voice, that same quiet, courteous tone we heard earlier, offering guidance, pointing out the amenities, wishing someone a comfortable night. Then silence again, or rather the return of the ambient sounds that are so constant we've stopped noticing. The gentle hiss of the heating system, the creak of wood settling, the faint ticking of cooling metal. Station masters in the Belle Époque period were figures of considerable authority in their communities, responsible not just for train operations, but often serving as postmasters, telegraph operators, and sources of news from the wider world. Many stations were built with living quarters above or beside the platform, and the station master's family would grow up with the rhythm of trains as the soundtrack to their daily lives, knowing each scheduled arrival and departure as intimately as the hours on a clock. The train begins to move again, so smoothly that we barely register the transition from stillness to motion, just a subtle shift in the quality of the darkness behind our eyelids, a return of that gentle rocking that has become so familiar. We sink deeper into sleep, past the threshold where outside sounds matter, down into the regions where the mind processes the day's experiences and sorts through memories and builds the strange architect dreams. In this deeper sleep, we dream of rooms we've known, of places we've traveled, of faces that smile and speak, though we cannot quite hear their words. The dreams have the quality of warmth and safety, reflecting our physical state in the comfortable berth, and we move through them without anxiety or fear, simply present to whatever unfolds interior landscape where the usual rules don't. Hours pass, though we have no way of measuring them. The train continues its journey through regions we'll never see, past stations whose names we'll never know, across rivers and through forests, and alongside fields where nothing moves except the wind through growing grain. The other passengers sleep in their compartment, each dreaming their own dream, each breathing their own rhythms, and together we form a community of sleepers being carried through the night toward whatever destinations we've chosen or that have chosen us. The moon travels across the sky in its ancient path, and as it moves, the angle of its light through our compartment window changes, the silver stripes across the blanket shifting slowly from one position to another, like the shadow on a sundial, marking time without numbers. We're unaware of this change in our deepest sleep, but some part of us registers it nonetheless, filing the information away in those spaces where the body tracks things the conscious mind doesn't need to know. Moonlight has traveled from that satellite to Earth for as long as both have existed, a journey of roughly 1¼ seconds, arriving here having bounced off ancient dust and stone that have never known atmosphere or ocean or the touch of living things. The light we see has traveled across vacuum to reach us, and yet it feels gentle, generous, a gift offered without expectation of return. Near what must be the deepest part of the night, though we cannot know this for certain, lost as we are in sleep, we dream of water, not threatening water, not storms or floods, but gentle water, a stream perhaps, running clear over smooth stones, or rain on a roof, or a fountain splashing into a stone basin. The sound of it fills our dream, musical and constant, and we realize slowly, floating up toward consciousness, that we're hearing real water, the sound of rain beginning to fall on the train's roof. It starts as scattered drops, each one distinct, tapping on the metal roof above our compartment with a sound like small fingers drumming a patient rhythm. Then more drops join the first and more until the individual taps merge into a continuous whisper, a blanket of sound that wraps around the train and somehow makes the interior feel even more protected, even more sheltered. Rain in the night while we're safe and warm inside. It's one of the most comforting sounds in the world, speaking to something ancient in us that knows the value of shelter, that understands protection and security as fundamental. We don't fully wake, but we rise close enough to the surface of consciousness to smile slightly, to register the rain, and be glad of it, to snuggle more deeply into the blanket and the pillow before sliding back down into sleep. The rain continues, sometimes heavier, lighter, adding its voice to the train's ongoing symphony. The bamboo blind keeps the drops from the window glass, and we can hear them landing there too, a slightly different sound than on the metal roof, softer, less resonant. Rain has its own geography, falling differently depending on altitude and terrain, creating ecosystems and shaping landscapes through the patient work of water on stone. The rain falling on this train has come from clouds that formed over the Atlantic, carried eastward by prevailing winds, condensing as they rose over cooler land, finally releasing their moisture in these drops that fall on forest and field and this moving train with equal impartiality. The steady rhythm of rain and wheels together creates a kind of music that's older than any human composition, the sound of weather and travel combined, and it's so deeply soothing that even our dreams slow down, becoming less narrative and more simply a sense of presence, of existing in comfort and safety while the world does its work outside. We drift in this state for what might be a long, held in suspension between sleep and waking, aware of our body's comfort and the train's motion and the rain's steady percussion, but not quite conscious in the normal sense. Eventually the rain begins to lessen, the drops falling farther apart, the sound thinning until we can once again hear individual taps on the roof, and then even those fade, and there's only the sound of water dripping from the train's eaves, from the roof edge and the window frames, a gentle aftermath that gradually diminishes into silence. The storm, if it was a storm, has passed, and we're through it and beyond it, still traveling eastward, still moving toward morning, though morning is still hours away. The air in the compartment smells different now, fresher somehow, as though the rain has cleansed more than just the outside world, as though its presence has reached even into this sealed space and renewed the atmosphere. We breathe deeply in our sleep, filling our lungs with this rain-washed air, and our body releases another layer of tension we didn't know we were carrying, settling even more completely into rest. We dream again, lighter dreams now, closer to dreams that will something about after rain, about walking on wet stones that gleam in sunlight, the smell of earth and growing. These dreams are pleasant and simple, asking nothing of us, simply offering images and sensations that complement our physical comfort and the train's steady motion. The night continues to deepen around us. That darkest hour before the first hint of dawn begins to touch the eastern horizon, and we rest in that darkness with complete trust, knowing without thinking about it that the train is carrying us exactly where we need to go, that the attendant is watching over the carriage that all is well and safe and exactly as it should be in this small, moving world. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The deepest part of night has its own quality, a particular stillness that exists even within motion, even within the ongoing song of the train. We rest in this stillness, our breathing slow and even, our body completely relaxed, and though we're deeply asleep, there's a part of us that remains gently aware of our surroundings, that knows we're safe and traveling and moving steadily for tomorrow. The rain has passed completely now, leaving behind only the memory of its presence and a world outside that's been washed clean. The air through the slight gaps around the window frame carries the scent of wet earth and wet leaves, that particular fragrance that rain creates when it meets the ground, when it touches growing things and releases their essential oils into the atmosphere. Even in sleep, even through the lowered bamboo blind and the compartment's closed door, this scent reaches us, registers somewhere in the deeper mind where such things are. In our dreams, we're walking through a forest, though we've never walked in this particular forest in wake. The trees are tall and their leaves shine with water droplets that catch light from somewhere we cannot see, and the path beneath our feet is soft with fallen needles and moss. We're not alone in the dream, but we cannot see our companions clearly, only sense their presence nearby, walking with us through this quiet green space where everything smells of rain and earth, living wood. The forests of eastern France were ancient, even in the Belle Époque, remnants of the great woodlands that once covered most of Europe, and they were carefully managed by foresters who knew each stand of trees, who marked certain oaks and beeches for harvest, while protecting others would live for centuries. These foresters walked their territories in all seasons, noting the health of the woods, clearing deadfall to prevent fire, watching for disease or damage, maintaining an ongoing relationship with the land that stretched back through generations. The dream shifts, as dreams do, and now we're no longer walking, but sitting beside a window. Not the train window, a different one, larger, looking out onto a garden where morning light is just beginning to touch the flowers. Someone brings us tea in a porcelain, and though we cannot see their face, we know there's someone we care for, someone whose presence is welcome and comforting. The tea is hot and fragrant, smelling of bergamot and distant mountains, and we cup our hands around it, feeling its warmth. Then that dream too dissolves, replaced by another, or by no dream at all, just the peaceful darkness of deep sleep where the mind rests from its constant work of making sense of the world, where thoughts don't have to follow logical paths and images can appear and disappear without explanation or justification. We float in this space for a time that might be moments or might be hours, held in the body's comfort and the train's steady rhythm. The train itself continues its journey with the reliability of something mechanical and yet somehow alive, something that has been running this route for so many years that it knows every curve and grade, every stretch of straight track, and every station platform. The engineer in the locomotive cab monitors, gauges, and watches the track ahead in the beam of the headlamp, making tiny adjustments to speed and steam that passengers never feel, maintaining that smooth forward motion that allows people to sleep and read and dine as though they were in a building rather than a vehicle moving at speed across the country. Train engineers of this era were trained for years before being allowed to operate passenger locomotives, learning first as firemen who shoveled coal and maintained steam pressure, then gradually taking on more responsibility until they could handle every situation the rails might present. They knew their locomotives intimately, could diagnose problems by sound or feel, could coax maximum performance from machines that became, in their hands, almost extensions of their own bodies. We stir slightly in our sleep, shifting position, and the berth accommodates this movement with barely a sound, the mattress adjusting beneath us, the pillow reshaping itself around our head. One hand emerges from beneath the blanket into the cooler air and we become dimly aware of the temperature difference, enough to make us tuck that hand back into the warmth, pulling the blanket higher around our shoulders. The wool responds to this adjustment, settling into its new configuration, continuing to provide exactly the right amount of warmth for comfort. The moon has moved across the sky, and now its light enters the compartment from a slightly different angle. Though we're too deep in sleep to notice this change consciously, the silver stripes it creates through the bamboo blind fall now across the floor instead of the bed, painting pale lines on the carpet that runs the length of the compartment. This carpet is woven in a pattern of stylized flowers and geometric, its colors chosen to hide the inevitable stains and wear of travel, while still maintaining an air of elegance. Railway carpets were designed by artists who understood that they needed to be both beautiful and practical, able to withstand thousands of footsteps while still contributing to the overall aesthetic of the carriage. The dyes used came from both natural and newly developed synthetic sources, carefully mixed to create colors that wouldn't fade too quickly in sunlight or lose their richness when cleaned with the harsh soaps and brushes that maintenance required. Outside the train, the landscape continues to change in ways we cannot see, but that the train registers in its motion. We're climbing now, ascending a gentle grade that leads up into higher country. And though the change in elevation is gradual enough that it doesn't disturb sleep, the locomotive is working harder, burning more coal, creating more steam to maintain speed against the pull of gravity. The fireman in the cab is busy with his shovel, feeding the firebox, watching the steam pressure gauge, working in partnership with the engineer to keep the train running smoothly. In the deeper valleys we've left behind, mist is forming, rising from the ground as the cooling air meets earth that still holds the day's warmth. This mist will thicken as the night progresses, filling the low places with white vapor, light of dawn, and glow like something out of a fairy tale. But here on the higher ground, the air is clearer, colder, and the stars shine with that particular brilliance they have in the hours before dawn, when the atmosphere is at its most stable and transparent. We dream of stars, though we cannot see them through the closed blind. In the dream, they're not distant points of light, but something we can almost touch, hanging close and bright, like lanterns strung between trees. We reach up toward them, and they swing gently in some unfelt breeze, and we understand without words that they're guiding us somewhere, showing us a path through darkness towards something we cannot yet see, but trust will be there when we arrive. The study of stars advanced rapidly during the Belle Époque, as improved telescopes and new photographic techniques allowed astronomers to map the heavens with unprecedented accuracy. They discovered that stars existed in vast numbers beyond what earlier generations had imagined, that our sun was just one among billions, and that the fuzzy patches, once thought to be clouds of gas, were actually entire galaxies. island universes containing billions of stars themselves. The dream fades, and we sink back into dreamless sleep, that deepest rest, where even the subconscious mind goes quiet and there's nothing but the body's gentle maintenance of itself, the slow, steady beat of the heart, the rhythmic expansion and contraction of lungs, the blood moving through vessels carrying oxygen and nutrients to every cell. We're completely unaware of these processes, these miracles of biological engineering that continue without conscious direction, but they're happening nonetheless, the body renewing itself during these hours of rest. Time passes in its mysterious way, measured by the train's steady progress toward the east, by the moon's movement across the sky, by the slow cooling of the heating pipes, as the fireman in the locomotive adjusts the fire for the long, gradual descent that will begin soon, once we crest this rise and start down the other side into the valleys that lead eventually to our destiny. The attendant makes another quiet round through the carriage, moving on feet so practiced they barely make a sound on the corridor carpet. He checks each compartment door, ensuring they're properly latched, pauses to adjust a heating valve that's hissing slightly, makes a note in his logbook about something that will need attention when the train reaches its terminus. He moves like a shadow through the sleeping train, a guardian whose presence ensures that rest can continue undisturbed. We're unaware of his passage, unaware of anything except the deepest rest, and we remain in this state as the train crests the rise and begins its long, gentle descent, as the wheels sing a slightly different song on the downslope, as the engineer eases back on the throttle and lets gravity do some of the work. The motion remains smooth, remains steady, a constant that anchors us even in the deepest. The compartment's lamp still burns at its lowest setting, the flame now so small it's barely more than a point of light, but it continues faithfully, using the last of the oil in its reservoir, providing that faint amber glow that makes the space feel inhabited and cared for rather than simply occupied. The mahogany panels around the lamp catch this light and hold it, their grain patterns seeming to shift and flow in the flickering glow. Lamp oil in this era was usually refined from petroleum, a relatively new technology that provided cleaner burning and less smoke than earlier animal or vegetable oils. The refinement process removed impurities that would cause sooting, leaving a clear liquid that burned with a steady flame and gave off minimal odor, making it ideal for enclosed spaces like railway carriages where air circulation was limited. Our sleep continues unbroken, deep, and restorative, the kind of sleep that will leave us refreshed when morning finally comes, ready for whatever the new day brings. We're completely at peace in this moment, completely trusting in the train's ability to carry us safely, in the Berth's ability to support and comfort us, in the night's ability to give us rest. There's nothing to worry about, nothing to plan, nothing to do except rest and let the hours pass and trust that we'll arrive where we need to be, when we need to be there. The blanket has warmed to our body temperature by now, creating a perfect microclimate beneath its folds, and we lie in this warmth like something precious being kept safe, protected from the night's coolness, from the world's complexities, from everything except this simple moment of rest and motion, the gentle rocking that continues without pause. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The hours of deepest night begin to give way, though dawn is still distant, still beyond the horizon that we cannot see. The change is subtle, nothing so obvious, but rather a shift in the quality of darkness, the way the air, the way silence was a different text than it did an hour. We remain deeply asleep, unaware of these changes on any conscious level, but the body knows, has always known, how to read the subtle signs that mark the passage from one part of night to another. The train has descended from the higher ground now and runs through a valley where a river flows along, unseen in the darkness, but present nonetheless, making its own journey towards the... The sound of it doesn't reach us inside the compartment, but it's there, water moving over stones and around bends, carrying with it leaves and small branches and all the debris that water collects on its endless journey downward. The railway engineers who surveyed this route chose to follow the river valley because it offered the gentlest grades, the easiest path through terrain that could be rugged and difficult. We dream of water again, but this time it's different from the rain dream. We're standing at the edge of a stream watching it flow past, clear enough to see the stones on the bottom, cool enough that we can feel its temperature from where we stand. Someone is with us, though we cannot turn to see who, and they're speaking quietly about something we cannot quite hear over the sound of the water. The dream has no urgency, no plot that's resolving, just this moment of standing beside flowing water in companionable silence. Rivers in this region of France have been pathways for as long as humans have inhabited the land, routes for travel and trade long before railways. The Celts and Romans both used these waterways, building settlements along their banks, and medieval merchants floated their goods downstream in flat-bottomed boats that could navigate the seasonal changes in depth and current. The rivers remember all of this in their patient way, carrying not just water, but history. The dream shifts, and we're no longer beside the river, but in a room we recognize from childhood. Though the details are slightly wrong in the way dream details often are, the window is in a different wall. The door opens onto a garden that didn't exist in reality. The furniture is arranged in impossible configuration, but the feeling of the room is right, the sense of safety and belonging, and we move through it, touching familiar objects, a book on a shelf, a vase on a table, things that have weight and substance in the dream, even if they bear no relation to. This is what dreams do in the deepest part of night. They sort through the accumulated experiences and emotions of waking life, filing them away, making connection, processing what the conscious mind couldn't or wouldn't process during the day. The dreams themselves don't need to make narrative sense. They're doing their work at a level deeper than story, deeper than logic, organizing and reorganizing the mind's vast library of experience. We turn in our sleep again, settling onto our other side, and the movement is so fluid, so natural, that it doesn't disturb the deeper currents of rest. The pillow adjusts beneath our head, the blanket shifts to accommodate the new position, and we sink back in that profound stillness where sleep does its most important work. Our breathing remains slow and regular, our heartbeat steady, all the body's systems humming along in the quiet symphony of life, maintaining its. The train passes through a small village, one of hundreds that dot this countryside. Their streets empty at this hour, their windows dark, except for perhaps one or two, where someone keeps vigil over a sick child or works at some task that cannot wait for daylight, or simply cannot sleep and sits by lamplight with a book. These villages have existed for centuries, some since medieval times or even earlier. Growing up around a crossroads or a mill or a monastery, their buildings of local stone and their roofs of tile or slate, depending on what the earth nearby could provide. Village life in the Belle Époque followed rhythms that had changed little over generations: planting and harvest, feast days and fast days, the weekly market, and the sun. The arrival of the railway changed some things, making it easier to travel to larger towns, bringing news and goods from distant places. But in many ways, the fundamental patterns remained the same, shaped by the land and the seasons and the accumulated wisdom of people who had lived in these places for longer than memory could reach. The train's passage disturbs nothing in the sleeping village except perhaps a dog who lifts its head from its paws, listens to the familiar sound of wheels on rails, then settles back into sleep. The village dogs know the train schedule as well as any station master, have heard these same trains pass at these same hours for years, and the sound holds no alarm, no reason to bark, or it's simply part of the night's texture, expected and understood. We dream now of walking through empty streets where lamplight falls in pools of gold from windows high, where our footsteps smooth by, where doorways open onto courtyards, where fountains and flowers. The dream, the quality of a memory, though it, and yet it's true, some feels real in a way that of whether it in waiting life. Our hands are folded together beneath the blanket, fingers interlaced, and in this position they create their own small pocket of warmth, one hand heating the other. We're completely comfortable, completely at rest, our body making only those tiny unconscious adjustments that keep us in optimal position for sleep. A slight shift of weight here, a small movement of legs there, nothing that rises to the level of conscious awareness, but all part of the ongoing process of rest and restoration. The heating pipes in the compartment have cooled somewhat as the night has progressed, the firemen back in the locomotive reducing the fire to conserve coal during these hours when fewer demands are made on the system. But the compartment has retained enough warmth from earlier that it remains comfortable, the air temperature perfect for sleep, cool enough to make the blanket welcome, but not so cold as to cause any discomfort. The railway companies prided themselves on this kind of attention to detail, on creating conditions that allowed passengers to rest as comfortably as they would in their own beds at home. The technology of heating railway carriages evolved rapidly in the late 19th century, moving from hot water bottles placed in the compartments before departure to the steam heating systems that allowed consistent warmth throughout the journey. Engineers experimented with different pipe configurations and valve systems, trying to find the arrangement that would provide even heat distribution without creating hot spots or allowing dangerous pressure buildups. Somewhere far ahead in the darkness, the engineer in the locomotive cab is watching for the signals that will tell him when to slow for the next station, when to proceed at full speed, when to exercise caution because of track work or some other condition. These signals use a system of colored lights and mechanical arms that can be seen from a distance, giving the engineer time to respond appropriately. He knows this route so well he could probably run it blind, but he watches the signals anyway, maintaining the professional vigilance that keeps passengers safe. We dream of lights now, colored lights like jewels suspended in darkness, and we're moving toward them, or they're moving toward us. It's hard to tell which. And there's music playing somewhere. We cannot identify the instrument or the melody. The dream has the quality of anticipation without anxiety, the feeling of approaching something pleasant, something looked forward to, and we move through this dream landscape with a sense of peaceful expectation. The lamp in our compartment flickers once more, its oil nearly exhausted now, the flame drawing on the last reserves in the reservoir. Soon it will gutter out entirely, but for now it continues to burn, casting its faint amber glow across the mahogany panels, creating shadows that dance and shift with the train's motion. When it finally does go out, the compartment will be dark, except for the thin lines of moonlight through the bamboo blind. But that will be enough, more than enough, to navigate by should we wake and need to find our way. The extinguishing of lamps was a kind of ritual in itself in the Belle Époque, marking the transition from evening to deep night, from activity to rest. In homes and hotels and railway carriages, lamps were turned down or put out according to regular schedules, their going dark, a signal that the day had truly ended and sleep could claim its rightful domain. The smell of lamp oil and spent wicks was one of the characteristic scents of the era, as familiar as wood smoke or baking bread. Our sleep continues unbroken, deep and peaceful, the kind of sleep that will leave us feeling restored when we finally wake. We're held safe in this small moving room, protected from the world outside, carried toward morning and whatever it will bring. The train knows where it's going, the engineer knows the route, the attendant watches over the carriage, and we can rest without concern, without worry, trusting in all these systems and all these people to deliver us safely to our death. The blanket has become like a second skin by now, its warmth indistinguishable from our own, and we rest beneath it in perfect comfort, breathing slowly, heartbeat steady, all the body's processes working in harmony to maintain and restore and prepare for the new day that will eventually come, but has yet arrived. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The night has reached that particular hour when it feels suspended, as though time itself has paused to take a breath before continuing toward dawn. We rest in this suspension, our sleep so deep now that dreams have ceased their flickering narratives and given way to pure unconsciousness, that state where the self dissolves into darkness and there's nothing but the body's quiet work. The train continues its steady progress, wheels singing their endless song on the rails, but even this sound is receded from our awareness, become part of the fabric of sleep itself rather than something heard. The compartment lamp finally exhausts its oil, and the flame gutters, shrinks to a pinpoint, then vanishes with a soft sound, a sigh. The darkness that follows is not absolute. Moonlight still filters through the bamboo blind, creating those thin parallel lines of silver that stripe the floor and the lower part of the wall. But it's a deeper darkness than before, more complete, more conducive, profound rest that these hours offer. The going out of the lamp marks something that we're too deep in sleep to notice, a transition from the attended evening to the unattended depth. In our compartment, and in all the others up and down the length of the train, passengers sleep in their various attitudes of rest. Some lie on their backs with hands folded on their chests. Some curl on their sides like children. Some sprawl with abandon across the width of their berths. Each person sleeps according to their nature and habit, but all are united in this common surrender to this trust in the train to carry them safely while they're vulnerable and unconscious. The practice of sleeping while traveling was once considered somewhat daring, requiring a leap of faith that the vehicle and its operators would maintain their vigilance while passengers slept. The earliest railway travelers often stayed awake all night, despite having berths available, too anxious about the speed and unfamiliarity of train travel to fully relax. But as railways proved their reliability year after year, decade after decade, this anxiety faded, replaced by the comfortable confidence that allowed people to sleep as soundly on a moving train as in their own beds. Outside, the landscape continues to transform in ways we cannot see. The train carrying us through regions of forest and farmland, past lakes that reflect the moon like mirrors laid flat on the earth, through valleys where mist pools thick and white. A fox crosses the tracks behind us, pausing to watch the train's red tail lamp recede into the distance before continuing its nightly hunt. An owl calls from a tree near the line, its voice carrying across the still air. The world is alive with nocturnal activity, but all of it happens beyond our awareness, beyond the protected space of our sleeping compartment. We've shifted position again in our sleep, rolled onto our back now, one arm flung out to the side and resting on the mattress beside us, the other tucked under the pillow. Our face has relaxed completely. All the small tensions that we carried during waking hours dissolved away, leaving the features smooth and peaceful. This is what we look like without the masks we wear for the world, without the effort of presentation, just the essential self at rest. The blanket has shifted with our movement, covering us less completely now, but the compartment's temperature has stabilized at a point where this doesn't matter, where we can rest comfortably with arms exposed to the air and still feel no chill. Our breathing has slowed even further, barely perceptible, the chest rising and falling in the shallow rhythm of deep sleep where the body's demands for oxygen are at their minimum. The merino wool blanket that covers us has remarkable temperature-regulating properties, able to wick away moisture while maintaining warmth, a natural technology that synthetic fibers have struggled to replicate. Each wool fiber is crimped in a way that creates air pockets, and these pockets trap heat when we're cold, but allow excess warmth to escape when we're too hot, maintaining comfort across a range of conditions. The train has entered a region where the tracks run through long stretches of open country with few villages, few lights, just the occasional farmhouse standing solitary in its fields. The engineer can run at good speed here, knowing the track is straight and well-maintained, and the locomotive settles into that particularly steady rhythm that makes passengers sleep even more deeply, that rocks them like a cradle rocks an infant. In the locomotive cab, the engineer and fireman work in the companionable silence of people who've done this together many times, each knowing their role so well that communication happens through glances and small gestures rather than words. The fireman feeds the fire, keeping the steam pressure in the optimal range, and the engineer monitors the track ahead in the beam of the headlamp, watching for anything unusual, any reason to slow or stop. They're both tired at this hour. The night shift is always demanding, but their attention never wavers. The safety of the sleeping passengers depends on their vigilance. We dream briefly again, surfacing just enough for images to form before sinking back down. This dream is of a garden at sunrise, though we're still hours away from sunrise in the waking world. The light in the dream is soft and golden, falling across flowers that nod on their stems, and there's the sound of birds beginning their morning songs, tentative at first, and then more confident. We walk through this dream garden, touching the flower, feeling dew on the pet, and everything smells green and gardens have held special significance in French culture since medieval times, when monks cultivated herbs and vegetables in the courtyards of their monasteries, creating spaces that served both practical and spiritual purposes. The formal gardens of the Renaissance and Baroque periods took this tradition and elevated it to an art form, using geometry and symmetry to impose order on nature, while the more naturalistic gardens of the 19th century sought to work with nature's own patterns and rhythms. The dream fades, and we descend again into that deeper place where even dreams cannot reach, where there's only the darkness behind closed eyes and the body's slow maintenance. Our pulse beats in our wrists and throat, steady as the train's rhythm, and our blood carries oxygen and nutrients to every cell, the invisible work that continues whether we're aware of it or not. The body knows how to do all this without instruction, has been doing it since before we were born, will continue until the moment it stops. Hours have passed since we first climbed into this berth and arranged the bedding and settled ourselves. In that time, the train has carried us across a considerable distance, through regions we'll never see except as place names on a map, past stations where we didn't stop, and over rivers whose names we don't know. The journey continues while we rest, the distance accumulating mile by, bringing us closer to our destination with each turn of the wheels. The bamboo blind rattles softly as a breeze finds its way around the train's profile, and the sound is pleasant, rhythmic, adding another layer to the ongoing symphony of travel. The bamboo was split and smoothed by hands in workshops far from here, assembled into these practical curtains by craftspeople who never imagined where their work would travel, who never thought about the windows it would cover, or the moonlight it would filter, or the sleeping passenger it would shelter from curious eyes. The tracks beneath us are themselves a kind of miracle when we think about it, though we're too deep in sleep to think about anything. Miles and miles of iron and steel laid across terrain that resisted every foot of progress, held in place by wooden ties and stone ballast, maintained by workers who walked the lines checking for problems, tightening bolts, replacing worn components, ensuring that this seemingly simple system of metal wheels on metal rails continues to function safely year after year. Railway maintenance in the Belle Époque employed thousands of workers who lived in small houses along the lines, each responsible for a section of track that they knew intimately, every curve and grade and potential problem spot. They worked in all weather, summer heat and winter cold, knowing that the safety of countless passengers depended on their diligence and skill. We lie in our berth, unaware of all this infrastructure that makes our journey possible, unaware of the engineer and fireman working in the locomotive, unaware of the attendant who even now is dozing in his small compartment, but will wake instantly if any bell rings or any need arises. We're unaware because sleep has claimed us completely, because rest is doing its essential work, because for these hours we're free from the need to be aware of anything except our own comfort and safety. The moon has moved lower in the sky, approaching the western horizon where it will eventually set, and its light through our window comes now at an even more acute angle, the silver stripes it creates stretching longer across the compartment floor. In another hour or two, the moon will be gone, and the compartment will be dark except for whatever starlight manages to penetrate the blind, but that time hasn't come yet, and we rest bathed in this borrowed light that has traveled so far to reach us. Our face in sleep is peaceful, unmarked by worry or stress. The features composed in that particular expression of complete rest that we never see in mirrors, because mirrors require waking to use. This is the face our loved ones might see if they watched us sleeping, the face that belongs to dreams and darkness, and the private self that emerges only when consciousness. The train passes over a bridge, the sound of wheels on rails changing for a moment to echo on steel girders, and far below the river flows toward the sea, carrying its burden of water and memory. The bridge was built in the 1880s by engineers who calculated every stress and load, who understood the mathematics of span and support, who created something that looks delicate from a distance but is strong enough to carry loaded trains across empty air dozens of feet above the water. We dream of crossing something, a threshold, a doorway, the line between two rooms or two gardens or two seasons, and in the dream, this crossing feels significant. We cannot say why. Feels like a moment of transition that matters even if we don't understand its meaning. Then the dream dissolves, and we're back in that deeper darkness where even symbolic meanings fade away. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The night is beginning its slow turn toward morning now, though dawn remains distant, still hours away beyond the eastern. This is the quietest hour, the stillest, when even the nocturnal creatures have retreated to their dens, when the world holds it between darkness. We sleep through this transition, unaware of the subtle changes happening in the air, in the quality of silence, in the way shadows begin to shift ever so slightly in anticipation of the sun that will eventually rise. The train continues eastward, following the route that was surveyed and mapped and built with such care decades ago, running on tracks that have carried thousands of trains before this one and will carry thousands more after. There's something reassuring in this continuity, in being part of a pattern that extends backward and forward in time, in knowing that we're not the first to travel this route in sleep and trust, nor will we be the last. Our sleep has reached that deepest trough where the body does its most important restorative work, where cells repair themselves and memories consolidate, and the immune system strengthens its defenses. We're completely unconscious of these processes, but they continue nonetheless, the body's wisdom working without need for our awareness or permission. This is what sleep is for, this renewal that happens only when we surrender control and let the deeper systems take over. The berth supports us perfectly, the horsehair mattress having molded itself to our particular shape and weight, creating a custom fit that will last until we rise and the mattress slowly returns to its original form. Horsehair is remarkable in this way, each fiber acting like a tiny spring that compresses under weight and rebounds when pressure is removed, providing support that adapts to the sleeper rather than forcing the sleeper to adapt to it. Horsehair for mattresses came from the manes and tails of horses, combed and cleaned and curled through a process that took considerable skill. The best hair came from horses that lived in cold climates, where their coats grew thick and strong, and the preparation of this hair for use in upholstery and bedding was a specialized trade, with guilds that protected their techniques and maintained standards of quality. We shift again in our sleep, a small adjustment of position, and the blanket moves with us, maintaining its coverage, continuing to provide that perfect balance of warmth and weight. One leg has emerged slightly from beneath the blanket's edge, the foot resting on the mattress in the cooler air of the compartment. But even this exposure doesn't disturb our rest. The body regulates its temperature automatically, using small adjustments like this to maintain optimal conditions for sleep. Outside, beyond the lowered bamboo blind, the landscape has changed again. We're passing through a region of gentle hills where vineyards climb south-facing slopes, the vines planted in rows that follow the contours of the land. In daylight, these vineyards would be beautiful to see, the geometric patterns of cultivation creating a kind of agricultural art. But now, in darkness, they're invisible, registered by the train only as changes in gradient, slight variations in the sound of wheels on rails as we climb one hill and descend the next. The vineyards of this region have existed for centuries, some dating back to Roman times when soldiers and settlers planted the first vines, bringing viticulture to lands that proved ideally suited for wine production. The knowledge of grape growing passed from generation to generation, each adding their own observations and techniques, slowly building the expertise that made this area famous for its wines. In the locomotive, the fireman is preparing for the approach to a station that lies ahead, stoking the fire to build steam pressure so the train can pull away smoothly after its brief stop. He works with the efficiency of long practice, knowing exactly how much coal to add and when, knowing how to read the gauges and adjust his efforts to maintain the pressure the engineer needs. His face is lit by the orange glow from the firebox, sweat gleaming despite the coolness of the night, and his muscles move with the rhythm of someone who has done this work for years. The station, when we reach it, is barely lit. Just a few lamps on the platform and one in the station map where he will exchange the mail bag. The train slows smoothly, the engineer applying the brakes with practiced gentleness, and we glide to a stop with barely a jolt. The station is silent, except for the hiss of steam and the quiet voices of the crew exchanging information with the station master. No passengers board or disembark at this hour, and after just a few minutes, we're moving again, pulling away from the platform and accelerating back to cruising speed. We sleep through all of this, the stop and start so smooth that they don't penetrate the depths of our rest. The train could stop at a dozen stations, and we would sleep through them all, trusting in its competence, in its ability to manage its own affairs while we remain unconscious and vulnerable in our berth. Railway stations in small towns were often the impressive buildings for miles around, built in styles that ranged from simple country vernacular to elaborate Second Empire with mansard roofs and ornate ironwork. They served as gateways between the local and the wider world, places where news arrived and departures happened, where tearful goodbyes were said and joyful reunions celebrated. The compartment has grown slightly cooler as the night has deepened, the heating pipes having lost most of their warmth, but the temperature remains comfortable, remains within that range where sleep can continue undisturbed. The blanket provides enough warmth, and the still air of the compartment holds what heat our body generates, creating a microclimate of comfort that needs no adjustment, no intervention. We dream again, briefly, a dream so fleeting it barely registers before dissolving. Something about water, about reflections on a surface we cannot, about colors that shift and blend and break again. The dream has no narrative, no characters, just these impressions of beauty and movement, and then it's gone, and we're back in that deeper darkness where dreams cannot reach. Our breathing continues its slow rhythm, barely perceptible under the blankets, and our heartbeat, steady patience of an organ that has been working since before we took our first breath and will continue until our last. We're unaware of these rhythms, but they define our existence, mark out the time we have, measure the span of this life that includes moments like this one, sleeping on a train, moving through the night. The tracks ahead are straight for a long stretch now, running through flat country where fields extend to the horizon on both sides, and the engineer can maintain good speed without constant vigilance, though his eyes never leave the track ahead for more than a few seconds at a time. The beam of the headlamp cuts through darkness, illuminating rails that gleam like silver ribbons, catching sometimes the eyes of an animal watching from the trackside, a deer perhaps, or a fox, or a rabbit frozen in the sudden light. The iron and steel that make these rails came from foundries and rolling mills where workers labored in conditions of tremendous heat and noise, pouring molten metal into molds, feeding ingots through massive rollers that squeezed them into shape, cutting and finishing the rails to precise specifications. The work was hard and dangerous, but it paid better than most industrial labor, and entire communities grew up around these mills, their prosperity tied to the demand for more rails, more track, more expansion of the railway network. We lie in our berth, unaware of all the industry and effort that makes this journey possible, unaware of the thousands of workers whose labor created the locomotive and the carriages and the rails and the stations, whose continuing work maintains and operates this vast system. We're able to rest peacefully because all of them are doing their jobs, because the system functions as designed, because trust has been earned through years of reliable service. The moon has set now, slipping below the western horizon, and the compartment is darker than before, lit only by starlight so faint it barely penetrates the bamboo blind. But our eyes are closed in sleep, and darkness or light makes no difference. We rest in whatever condition the world provides, trusting that when it's time to wake, light will be there to wake us. And until then, darkness is welcome, is perfect, is exactly what sleep requires. Our hands have found each other again beneath the blanket, fingers loosely intertwined, and they rest together in that small gesture of self-comfort that we make unconsciously in sleep. The hands are warm where they touch, sharing heat, and the contact seems to deepen our rest somehow, to anchor us more firmly in this state of peace. The train rocks gently as it rounds a long curve, and the motion is like being cradled, like being held in arms that know exactly how to soothe and comfort. We sink deeper into sleep, if such a thing is possible, our consciousness so far removed from waking that we might be anyone, anywhere, untethered from identity and history and all the complications of being ourselves. In this moment, we're simply a body at rest, a collection of systems working in harmony, a vessel for sleep and dreams and restoration. The wheels sing on the rails below us, that endless song of metal on metal that has been the soundtrack of railway travel since the first trains ran on the first tracks nearly a century ago. It's a sound that generations have fallen asleep to, that has accompanied countless journeys, that marks the passage of distance and time in a language understood by anyone who has ever traveled by night train. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The darkest part of night has passed now, though morning is still held at bay beyond the edge of the world, waiting its turn. We sleep through this transition, unaware that we've crossed some invisible threshold in the night's progression, unaware of anything except the profound rest that holds us in its gentle grip. The train continues its eastward journey with the same steady rhythm it has maintained for hours, the wheels finding their endless song on the rails, the locomotive pulling its burden of sleeping passengers through landscape we cannot see and will never know we passed. In our deepest sleep, we've become part of the train itself in some fundamental way, our breathing synchronized with its motion, our heartbeat aligned with its rhythm. We are passenger and vessel merged into one thing, moving together through darkness toward whatever destination awaits. This is the gift of night travel. This dissolution of boundaries between self and surroundings, this temporary surrender of individuality to the larger pattern of the journey. The berth holds us as it has held us all night, the horsehair mattress conforming perfectly to our shape, the linen sheets cool against our skin where they touch, the wool blanket maintaining exactly the right degree of warmth. Everything is in balance. Everything is exactly as it should be. And we rest in this perfection without knowing we're resting, without awareness of comfort, because comfort is so complete, it requires no acknowledgement. Our face in sleep shows the accumulation of hours of rest, the features even more relaxed than they were earlier, the small lines that form around eyes, mouth during waking hours smoothed away entirely. This is the face that exists only in deep sleep, the face beneath all the expressions we wear for the essential self stripped of performance and presentation. If we could see ourselves now, we might not recognize this peaceful stranger. The study of sleep itself was just beginning during the Belle Époque, as scientists started to understand that it was not simply absence of waking, but a complex state with its own patterns and purposes. They measured breathing and pulse, noted the movements of eyes beneath closed lids, began to map the territories of consciousness and unconsciousness. But much remained mysterious, as it still does, the brain's journey through the night, still holding secrets that science has only partially illuminated. Outside the compartment, the train passes through a region where morning mist is already forming in the low places, rising from the earth, as the air begins its first subtle cooling before dawn. This mist gathers in hollows and follows the courses of streams, creating landscapes of white vapor that glow faintly with starlight. It's beautiful in a way that no one on the train can. Beauty that exists for its own, witnessed only by the occasional nocturnal animal or sleepless traveler happening to look out at exactly the right moment. The mist forms when warm, moist air meets cooler surfaces. The water vapor condensing into droplets too small to fall, but large enough to scatter light and create that characteristic white obscurity. In valleys where mist forms regularly, the local ecology adapts to take advantage of this moisture with plants that can harvest water from the air and animals that time their activity to the rhythms of fog and clarity. We dream of mist ourselves, though we cannot know that real mist is forming outside our window. In the dream, we're walking through white vapor so thick we can see only a few feet ahead. But we're not lost or frightened, merely curious about what we might find. Shapes loom and fade, a tree perhaps, or a building, or simply denser patches of fog that suggest form. We walk steadily forward, trusting that the path will reveal itself, that we'll arrive wherever we're meant to arrive. Then the dream shifts, and we're in a room filled with morning light, though morning is still hours away in the waking world. The light in the dream is gentle and golden, falling through tall windows onto polished wooden floors, and there's music playing somewhere, a piano perhaps, playing something we almost recognize but cannot quite name. We stand in this light, feeling it warm our face and hands, feeling blessed by it somehow, chosen to receive this gift of illumination. The dream fades as dreams do, dissolving back into the darkness of deep sleep, and we continue our rest without interruption, without anything to disturb the profound peace we've found in this moving. Hours have we first laid down, and our body has used those hours well, repairing and preparing for the day that will eventually come, not yet arrive. The heating pipes have gone completely cold now, their warmth exhausted, but the compartment's temperature remains stable, held there by the insulation of the wooden walls and the still air that doesn't circulate unless disturbed. We've created our own warmth beneath the blanket, a cocoon of body heat that needs no external source to maintain itself. And we rest in this self-generated comfort, completely unaware of the temperature beyond our immediate surroundings. The attendant has made his final round of the night, moving through the carriage even more quietly than before, knowing that these hours before dawn are when sleep is deepest and most precious. He's checked every door, adjusted the few heating valves that were hissing, made notes in his logbook about small matters that will need attention later. Now, he's back in his own small compartment, not quite sleeping, but resting, ready to wake fully when dawn comes and passengers begin to stir. Railway attendants often came from families where service was a tradition, where the skills of anticipating needs and providing comfort were passed from parent to child like any other trade. They learned to move silently through corridors, to knock so softly it wouldn't startle, to remember faces and preferences from one journey to the next. The best attendants were almost invisible, not needed, but appeared as if by magic when their services were required. The train has climbed gradually over the last hour, ascending into higher country where the air is thinner and cooler, where forests of pine and fir replace the deciduous trees of the lowlands. The locomotive works harder on these grades, burning more coal, creating more steam. But the engineer manages the climb so smoothly that passengers feel only the slightest change in motion, nothing that would disturb sleep or even register in dreams. We lie in our berth, breathing the still air of the compartment, air that has warmed to body temperature and holds the faint scent of lavender from the sheets, of wool from the blanket, of the lemon oil used to polish the mahogany panels. These scents blend into something that becomes the signature fragrance of this particular night, this particular journey, something we might recognize years later if we encountered it again, might remember without quite knowing why. Our hands have separated now, lying loosely on either side of our body, relaxed and open, fingers slightly curled. The hands that during waking hours are always busy with tasks, always grasping or gesturing or working, are at rest now, doing nothing, simply existing as parts of a body that needs no activity from them. Even our hands are sleeping in their way, the muscles and tendons released from the constant subtle adjustments that maintain grip and position during waking hours. The bamboo blind still covers the window, its slats creating that familiar pattern of parallel lines, but there's no moonlight now to filter through them, no starlight bright enough to make a difference. The compartment is dark, truly dark, the kind of darkness that used to be common before electricity lit every corner of the night, but has become rare in modern times. We rest in this darkness as humans have rested in darkness for millennia, trusting in it, finding in it the conditions that allow the deepest sleep. Darkness itself has properties that encourage rest, signaling to the brain that it's time for sleep, triggering the release of hormones that make us drowsy and keep us sleeping. The invention of artificial light disrupted these ancient patterns, allowing people to extend their activities into hours that would once have been given over entirely to rest. But on this train, in this compartment, we're experiencing something closer to the natural rhythms that governed human sleep for most of history. The train passes over another bridge, the sound changing briefly as it did before, wheels on steel instead of wheels on earth-supported rails, and far below, another river flows toward the sea. This river is smaller than the earlier one, narrower, faster, running cold with snowmelt from mountains we're approaching, and it carries with it the taste of granite and ice and the high forests where it began. But we know nothing of this river, sleep through its passing as we've slept through so much else, and the train continues on the other side without pause. We're approaching the final hours of night now, that period just before dawn, when the world holds its breath before the great turning that will bring light back to the land. We sleep through this approach as we've slept through all the rest, our body knowing it still has time for rest, still has hours before it will need to wake and engage with the day. The train will arrive at our destination in the morning, we'll pull into the station and come to rest, and then it will be time for our belongings and step down onto the platform into whatever awaits us. But that time hasn't come yet, and until it comes, we rest, we sleep. We let the train carry us forward through these last precious hours of darkness and motion, and the peculiar peace that comes only from sleeping while traveling, from trusting in systems and people we cannot see to deliver us safely to where we. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The night is drawing toward its close now, though dawn has not yet broken. These are the last hours of darkness, the final stretch of journey before morning light begins to touch the eastern sky and transform everything it finds. We sleep through this approaching transition, held safe in our berth, wrapped in the blanket's warmth, breathing the still air of the compartment while the train continues its eastward progress with the same steady rhythm it has maintained throughout. Our sleep has lightened, risen from those profound depths where consciousness disappears entirely, surfacing toward the layers where dreams can form again, and where the first stirrings of eventual waking begin to make themselves felt, though that waking is still distant, still held at bay by the body's need for these last hours of rest. We're not quite ready to return to the waking world, not quite finished with the restoration that sleep provides, and so we remain suspended in this state between depths and surface, between unconsciousness and awareness. The train passes through a region of higher elevation now, the air outside thinner and colder, carrying the scent of pine forests and mountain stone. The tracks here follow routes that required tremendous effort to build, carved into hillsides and spanning gorges on bridges that seem impossibly delicate, but are strong enough to carry the heaviest locomotives. The engineers who surveyed these routes spent years walking the mountains, mapping every possible, calculating grades and curves, finding ways to bring the railway into country that seemed determined to resist all human intrusion. We dream of mountains though we cannot see, dream of peaks that rise wide against dark sky, of slopes covered in forests that climb toward tree line and then give way to bare rock. In the dream, we're standing at a window, looking out at these mountains, feeling small before their immensity, but not frightened, only awed by their presence, by the way they've stood here for millions of years and will stand for millions more, indifferent to trains and passengers and all the brief flickers of human activity. Mountain ranges form over geological time spans so vast they make human history seem like a single breath. The mountains we're passing were thrust up by the collision of continental plates, their rocks folded and fractured and lifted toward the sky, then slowly worn down by weather and ice and flowing water, shaped into the forms we see today. In another million years, they'll be different again, worn lower or uplifted higher, depending on forces beyond human scale or control. The dream shifts, and we're walking on a mountain path, though we've never walked this particular. The air is cool and clear, so clear we can see for what seems like hundreds of miles, and the light has that particular quality that comes with high altitude, sharp and clean and almost crystalline. We walk slowly, taking our time, knowing there's no hurry, nowhere we need to be, except here in this moment. Then the dream fades, and we're back in deeper sleep, though not as deep as before, hovering now in that state where the body begins its slow preparation for waking, even though waking is still hours away. Our breathing remains slow and steady, our heartbeat calm, but there are subtle changes beginning, small shifts in the patterns that will eventually build toward consciousness and the start of a new day. The berth still cradles us perfectly, the mattress still conformed to our shape, the blanket still providing exactly the right warmth. Nothing has changed in the compartment since we first prepared it for sleep hours ago. The mahogany panels still gleam faintly in the darkness. The bamboo blind still covers the window. The small shelf still holds our bundle of letters tied with ribbon. Everything is as it was, as it should be, waiting patiently for us to wake and engage with it again. The letters we read before sleeping seem like something from a distant time now, though it's been only hours since we untied that ribbon and opened those envelopes and read the words written by people we care for. The letters remain where we left them, unchanged, but we've traveled so far while sleeping that they belong now to a different place, a different moment, even though they're still right here beside us, waiting to be read again. We choose when we wake. Letter paper in the Belle Époque was often made from linen rags, pulped and pressed and dried into sheets that could hold ink without bleeding and could last for decades without yellowing or becoming brittle. The best paper was made by hand in mills, powered by water wheels, each sheet individually formed on screens of wire mesh, dried in airy lofts, and cut to size with careful precision. Outside the train, the first birds are beginning to wake in the forests we're passing through, though their songs don't reach us inside the sealed compartment. They start tentatively, one bird calling and then another answering, slowly building toward the chorus that will greet the sunrise when it comes. These birds are following patterns written into their very being, patterns that connect them to millions of years of evolution, to ancestors who sang from trees that no longer exist in landscapes that have been transformed beyond recognition. We stir slightly in shifting position one more time, and the movement is so small, that it barely disturbs the blanket's drape or the pillows. We're still deeply asleep, but perhaps not quite as deeply as an hour ago, as 2 hours ago, as 3. The body knows that morning is approaching, even if the conscious mind remains unaware, and it begins its slow work of preparation, adjusting hormone levels, changing breathing patterns in ways too subtle to notice, readying itself for the transition from sleep to waking that will eventually come. The train begins a long, gentle descent now, gravity helping it along, the engineer easing back on the throttle and letting the locomotive's weight carry it forward. The brakes stand ready if needed, but for now they're not required. The descent gradual enough that momentum and gravity achieve a perfect balance. The wheels sing a slightly different song on the downward grade, something in the pitch or rhythm changed by the angle, but the change is so subtle that even if we were awake, we might not notice it. We dream one more time, surfacing briefly into that light sleep where dreams are clearest and most vivid. In this dream, we're back in the compartment, though it looks different somehow, larger or smaller or arranged in some other configuration, and we're preparing for sleep all over again, lowering the berth, smoothing the sheets, adjusting the pillow. The dream has a recursive quality, a sense of repetition and return, as though we're caught in a loop of preparation and rest, an endless cycle that feels comforting rather than troubling. The act of preparing for sleep has been ritualized in human cultures throughout history, each society developing its own patterns and practices. Some cultures used specific prayers or meditations. Some had particular positions or orientations they considered auspicious. Some burned herbs or incense to encourage rest. All of these practices serve the same fundamental purpose: to mark the transition from waking to sleeping, to create a boundary between the day's activities and the night's rest. The dream fades, and we descend once more, not as deep as before, but deep enough, finding that level of sleep where the body continues its restorative work while the mind floats in peaceful darkness. We're comfortable beyond measure, safe beyond, held in the embrace of berth and blanket, the train's steady motion. Nothing disturbs us, nothing intrudes, and we rest. Night moves toward its ending. The heating pipes begin to warm again as the fireman back in the locomotive stokes the fire in preparation for arrival, building steam pressure for the final stretch of track that leads into the station where our journey will end. The warmth creeps through the carriage gradually, so gradually that it doesn't disturb sleep, just slowly raises the temperature in the compartment from cool to comfortable, preparing passengers for waking without actually waking them. We remain asleep. We'll remain asleep for a while longer, until the light begins to change and the motion of the train shifts toward stopping, and the attendant knocks softly on doors to offer morning coffee or tea. Until then, we rest, we float. We exist in that suspended state between yesterday and tomorrow, between departure and arrival, between the person we were when we boarded this train and the person we'll be when we step down onto the platform at our destination. The night has been kind to us, has given us exactly what we needed: rest and restoration, shelter and safety, the experience of being carried through darkness toward light. We've surrendered to the train's competence, trusted in its ability to deliver us, and that trust has been rewarded with sleep so deep and peaceful that we'll wake feeling renewed, ready for whatever the day ahead might bring. The bundle of letters still rests on the shelf beside us, the ribbon still tied in its neat bow. The mahogany panels still gleam in the darkness. The bamboo blind still filters whatever light tries to enter from outside. The wool blanket still covers us with its perfect warmth. Everything is as it was, as it should be, and we sleep on in this prepared place, this berth made ready for rest, this compartment configured for comfort, this train carrying us steadily eastward through the final hours of night. We prepared this space for sleep, and sleep came. We lowered the blind and arranged the bedding and settled ourselves for rest, and rest found us and held us and gave us these hours. The simple intention of the night has been fulfilled. We are sleeping on the moving train. We are being carried toward our destination. We are safe and warm and deeply, profoundly at rest. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. The train carries us onward through the night. And so, our night on the Belle Époque train draws gently to a close. We've traveled together through darkness and rest, through the rituals of preparing a berth and the deep peace of sleep while moving through the countryside. The train has carried us safely, as trains have carried travelers for generations. And now, as this story ends, you can let yourself continue drifting in whatever rest you've found, or slowly return to waking if that's where you need to be. Thank you for traveling with us tonight, for allowing these words to accompany you into relaxation. There's something special about sharing a journey, even an imagined, and we're grateful you chose to spend this time aboard our Belle Époque night train. If you enjoyed this quiet journey through the night, if these low-stress stories bring you the peace and rest you're looking for, we'd be honored if you would subscribe to our channel. There are many more journeys waiting, other trains to board, other rituals of evening to explore, other quiet spaces where rest can find you. By subscribing, you'll ensure these stories are always there when you need them, ready to carry you gently to sleep. But for now, whether you're drifting off or simply resting in this moment, know that you're exactly where you need to. The train continues its journey. The wheels sing their endless song, and all is sleep peacefully, travel safely, and rest well. The train carries you onward through the night.